Hey everyone, and welcome to The Growth. I am your host, Brandon Cana, and this podcast is all about helping you grow in any aspect of life. And today we have on Dan Carlucci. He is a multifamily real estate investor, and he does a lot of real estate investing. So this is going to be our topic today. So welcome to the show, Dan. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thanks so much for having me on, Brandon.
Of course, I'm really excited to have you on because I know you have a lot of experience in this field. And even myself personally are interested in investing in real estate. So I know a lot of people out there are looking, have some questions that need to be answered. So
hmm
go ahead and just, before we start into questions, just tell everyone a little bit about you. And yeah.
Sure. That'd be great. So I've been involved in multifamily investing for a very long time. I actually started back in the 1990s. I originally began as a passive investor, but I later moved on to doing my own projects as an active investor. So to clarify what that means, passive investor means I was just starting out to invest in other a project that somebody else was in charge of as sort of like the general partner. And then later on, I became the general partner where I was starting to work on my own projects. And I was one of the general partners bringing in passive investors into my own deals. So I did that for the bulk of my career and have been doing that. I've done that full time for many years. There have been some years here and there where it has been more of a side business as I've been involved in other things outside of real estate investing. But yeah, I
Yeah.
started back in the 1990s. I've been involved in a number of different aspects of real estate investing with respect to multifamily, sourcing the deals, doing the due diligence, both on the property, on the market that the property was in, getting the finance secured, raising funds from investors through private placement offerings. I've done that through limited partnerships and more commonly later through LLCs, limited liability companies. I've been involved in property management. I've actually been a partner in a property management company, managing our own properties in-house. We did not fee manage for other people. It was just for our own in-house
Yeah.
portfolio. I've also been the on-site manager, which means that I actually lived on-site in apartment buildings. This is for multiple properties that I actually owned. So I was my own manager, literally working for myself. And by the way, first little tip for your listeners, I would never tell the tenants I was one of the owners. You always want to be able to kind of pass the buck, especially when you're
Yeah.
dealing with tenants face to face. You always want to be able to say, oh, let me check with the owner and see if I can get that approved, and then that sort of thing. You never want them to think you're the owner. It's always a good idea to say, oh, I work for the management company, which was
Right.
true.
Right.
So I've done that. And I've also worked with third-party management companies who are third-party independent contractors, which is probably the most common for a lot of investors. So, and I've had two large sales or points of time in my career where I sold off everything. The first was in 2007. And in retrospect, I'm very proud of that I sold off everything in 2007 before the crash. And the second was recently in 2018 and early 2019. So I'm actually gearing up now for my next the next phase of my career, and I'm starting a new company and looking to do some investing in multifamily again for the long term.
Yeah, so clearly you have a lot of experience in the multifamily field and some property management, and it's that's why I wanted to have you on today because you've been through it, you've been through the recessions, you've been through a lot, and you have a lot of experience. Um, so that's really good. And so just so everyone else knows that there's a lot of different ways to invest in real estate, and Dan primarily does multifamily. And so that's his main focus. There's other aspects of real estate investing we can get into. Um, Dan, do you want to touch on that?
Yes, of course. I mean, first off, multifamily, which means investing in essentially apartment buildings, and that could be anything from a duplex all the way up to to large apartment communities with hundreds of units or hundreds of
Right.
apartments. But there's a lot of different types of real estate. A lot of my friends are investing in self-storage units, which a lot of those investors always claim that that's a recession-proof sector of the real estate industry. So I've had a lot of people try to convince me to get into self-storage units. I just do one thing. I invest in multifamily.
Right.
A lot of people, of course, do single family. Fix and
Yep.
flips have been really, really big for a long time, thanks in part to the reality TV shows,
Yep.
HGTV.
Yep.
Fix and flips are really big. And then some people will do a buy and hold. Some people will fix and hold as opposed to fix and flip. And there are just a number of different types. You also have people that get involved in investing without dealing with the real estate. They buy mortgage notes. And so they're
Right.
not, I've never gotten involved in that. I'm not as familiar with that area, but I talk to a lot of note buyers, and they don't deal with tenants. They don't deal with the actual property. They just want to get their mortgage payments. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of different ways. So to kind of clarify for someone who's newer and trying to explore this jungle of real estate, well, where do I start and what do I do? It's, there's so many different areas, and you need to look at your own needs and your own goals. So the traditional way for a lot of people to get started, and this would assume if somebody wants a career in real estate as an investor, and especially if you're starting at the beginning and you may not have a lot of money or credit. I started out with next to nothing. A lot of people begin with wholesaling. I didn't do that, but
Right.
a lot of people start with that, where you essentially, here's the theory behind it. You get a property under contract. Let's say it's a house, $200,000, just going to use a round figure there. And you have a ready list of buyers. So you found that property maybe off market, something that other people couldn't have found. Then you turn around and sell that contract to one of your buyers for, a markup of, 5%, make a quick $10,000.
Right.
That's the theory. Sounds great, that you could do something easily without your own money or credit and make some quick money. The reality is very different.
Hmm.
It's a lot of states, including where I live in California, are cracking down on wholesaling.
Yep.
They're restricting what someone who does not have a real estate license can do. They restrict what you're able to make on those, flipping those contracts.
Yeah.
And it's also right now there has to be enough of a margin in the value to be able to charge that extra that extra amount.
Right.
So I don't know if this is a great time to be getting into wholesaling, but that's
Hmm.
how a lot of people historically would get started.
Hmm.
And then a lot of people then get involved in fix and flips, and then get into buy and hold. I think most people starting out should try the most conservative strategy possible, and I think holding on to something long term would make the best sense.
Right.
Not trying to flip a property, not trying to speculate, not buying a property that's run down and needs a lot of work unless you have a lot of capital, or if you have a lot of
Yeah.
experience or good solid network of people to work with on your team. So it's I think that buying and holding rental properties is really a good way to go. And again, that could be as small as a duplex, or it could be a larger property. And to
Yeah.
clarify, even within multifamily and buying and holding rentals, there's a line that's drawn. And again, this is for the newer listeners.
Hmm.
4 units and below is considered residential. Five
Right.
units and up is, from the lender's perspective, considered commercial.
Right.
I don't mean commercial in terms of retail or shopping centers, but
Hmm.
commercial in the sense that it's now seen as in an investment class.
Exactly.
All the rules are different. How lenders lend on the property is different. How the property is appraised is different. The type of financing you can get, the sort of down payment you'll have to put down. Everything is very, very different. How you manage the property, everything's very different when you're buying a duplex, triplex, or fourplex in the residential class, or if you're looking at 5 units and up. So again, that's something else that people are going to need to look at and decide what is going to make the most sense, because they're just governed by a completely different set of rules if you're 5 units and over, or 4 units and under.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just so I can relate to the listeners, myself personally, I've been looking at buy and hold, because it would be my first investment, because I know that is, pretty much the safest way. Because if you get into a fix and flip and you need to spend more money than you're going to sell it for, you're in trouble. And wholesaling, like you said, is pretty difficult right now. Um, and higher levels of investing, you need to have more experience to get involved into that. You can't just jump in right away without a lot of capital. So definitely for first-time investors, buy and hold is definitely a great way to start. Um, and Dan, do you want to go into how you got started? I know you said you started with a little bit of capital. I know your story is a little different, but do you want to give some insight on how you got started?
Sure. I got started in that, again, what I'm defining as the residential class, just focused on duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. I just had a number of friends of mine that were into real estate, and everybody was looking to work on something, and we decided to work on each other's projects. So I initially put in some money that I was making at my full-time job to invest into other, real estate projects that were essentially operated by friends of mine, where they were the main general
I
partners,
see.
and I was essentially a passive investor. But yeah, I got started with buy and hold duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, just because you could get in with small down payments. I mean, this is back in the 90s. A lot of things are different. We didn't have social
Right.
media,
Right.
so yeah, how you networked and built your team was very different.
Yeah.
Uh, Prices were
Definitely.
different. I was buying, fourplexes for, in California for $250,000, 10% down. So we only needed 25 grand.
Yeah.
And if there were two or three of us on the deal, I mean, splitting that up, even when you were really young, really wasn't a whole lot of money. So we were able to get into a lot of different properties.
Yeah.
But yeah, similar principles can be applied today.
Yeah, and
And
on that note, do you think it's a good idea for people to get a group of people or friends or investors together to go on properties together?
you can. That's what I did. And partnerships allow you to do a lot more, but it also means you're sharing the spoils. You're also
Right.
sharing the responsibility, but it also means you're in a relationship,
Yep.
and it's not like a relationship where you can just break up with the person. You guys are in bed together with that property. You own that property,
Yep.
unless some of the partners want to buy you out, or you're able to buy them out. You guys are stuck with each other until the bitter end,
Yep.
and that for better or for worse.
Yep.
So it's, yeah, you don't really test your partners until you're dealing with some real stress and real issues.
Yeah, you
It
have to really like your partners, huh?
You got to like your partners through the worst times,
Yeah.
and that can be a tough thing to do. Everything has to be defined in writing, because when you're going
Right.
through tough times, which you will at some point, people are going to get emotional. People are going to be under stress, and you have to have governing documents that say, oh well, in case of X, you have to do Y. The governing documents, whatever that would be, if
Right.
you're in a LLC, it would be an operating agreement for the LLC. That's a limited liability company.
Yeah.
You have to have a governing document that defines what everyone is supposed to be doing, who's supposed to be collecting the rent, who's paying the bills, who's managing the property, who's supposed to be looking after the property. If you're hiring a property manager, who's in charge of managing the manager. You have to define what everyone's doing, and be very specific. What is the company paying for as far as owner expenses, and what are the owners having to pay for? If the
Right.
property's not local and you hop on a plane and fly out to the property, who's paying for that trip? The
Yeah.
company or you? If
Yeah.
you're paying for it, you get the tax write-offs, but
Yep.
you need to have all of that defined ahead of time, and
And
that'll
so,
help you
yeah,
get through it.
for a first-time investor, I mean, there's a lot of logistics that would have to go into, starting a company, LLC, or whatever company you guys want to start. So where do you think people would go to get more information on, do you want them to talk to attorney, CPA? I mean, where should people go to get more information on all these logistics that go into this?
You do have to talk to an attorney in your state.
Hmm.
And I don't know, if you're buying a property out of state, then you'll need an attorney in that state as well to deal with the contract and then due diligence and a number of other issues in that state. And yeah, that can get pricey, but you can't really skimp on that. I know there are a lot of legal forms and websites where you can download things
Right.
online, and you think, well, yeah, I can do this for free or very
Yeah,
inexpensively,
yeah, yeah.
and yeah, you can save some money that way. And I think that's sort of a shortcut, is something that can really come back and haunt you.
Yep.
You really need to spend the money for a good attorney who's real estate experienced, who understands real estate partnerships, and does this for a living. They've seen it all. They've seen
Exactly.
they've seen the marriages, so to speak, these real
Yep.
estate partnerships break up. They've seen the ugly side of it. They'll know
Right.
what needs to be in place, what needs to be filed with the state. They'll know all the steps you need to take. They'll advise you, LLC or S corp. You need to understand when, there are times where an S corp for certain types of real estate investing, especially short term, are much more favorable than LLCs. And there are other circumstances where the LLC is much more favorable. The
Right.
sort of long term investing I do is more, LLCs are more appropriate for what I'm doing, but those are legal questions. And I probably should offer the disclaimer at this point in your podcast, Brandon.
Yes.
I am not a legal or tax professional, and I am not here to offer any legal or tax advice to any of your listeners. Please
Yes.
consult an appropriate professional. I'm just
Exactly.
offering my advice and just relating my own experience, but this is not meant to be construed in any way as legal advice.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, just so people understand when they're listening to this, please go ahead and do your own due diligence. Please get an attorney. Please have people in the legal space look at what you're going to be doing with a company before you start one. Don't just, go look up at how to start an LLC and, start one. Please, contact the appropriate people who are going to do this legally in the right way, because you want to make sure you have all the headaches figured out before you get into a bad situation. So just so everyone knows, please, make sure you contact an attorney before, starting a company. And so it sounds like for first time investors, just if you want to get your feet wet in real estate investing, just do a simple buy and hold, buy a property and, try to get a rent that's going to cover the mortgage. And so, um, Dan, what do you really look for when it comes to a multi-family investment? What exactly are you looking for in terms of the rents, the cap rate, all those different things? What are you looking for exactly?
Oh, wow. Well, there's quite a few criteria that I have and understand that I'm also looking for larger projects. So
Yes.
everybody needs to ask themselves, what are your goals? And is your goal more to increase your net worth, or is your goal cash flow, or is your
Right.
goal both? For me personally, I like every project that I buy has to increase my net worth and has to increase my cash flow. So that my projects have to have a positive cash flow from day one. That is
Right.
very, very important for me. But I also look for a number of other things. So taking a step back, I like to look at the market. I like to look at where the property is. And some people will chase a deal and then they'll look for a deal anywhere and then they'll kind of research the market. That might be, I mean, that's one way to do it. I think that's a little bit backwards. I think it's better to research the market where you want to invest first,
Right.
then look for the property. And how do you decide on the market? Obviously, you want to look for certain fundamentals. So I'm kind of giving a roundabout answer to your question,
No
but
worries.
it starts with the market,
Right.
not with the actual property. So first, if you're going to throw a dart at a map of the United States and say, well, hey, I'll just pick this city here, and to pick some random city, how often are you going to go there? If you're
Yeah.
picking something that's out of state. For me in California, there are a number of reasons why I may want to invest outside of California. There's some legislation in California that's not favorable to landlords.
Right.
Cap rates are very compressed. So I do like to look out of state. So here's one idea is that a lot of investors will buy in a market where they travel too often. Maybe it's where your in-laws live or your relatives or
Right.
your parents, if they live in a different state and if that state's favorable to investing. If you're flying out there several times a year, it's a great opportunity for you to go and check out your property. So you want to pick a state where you're going to be visiting frequently. If you don't have any family there or any other reason to visit there, then you're going to have to make a commitment to be making a number of trips there, even if you're hiring a property manager.
Hmm.
So you really have to start with the market. You've got to look at a lot of fundamentals in the market. You want to see population growth. You want to see job growth. You want to know what the unemployment is in that particular market. So there are a number of different things that you need to look for. A lot of market research. I'm going to give your listeners a couple key resources here that they can go to right now.
Awesome.
Yeah. So here's a good one. Citydata.com. I'm going to spell that out. It's city-data, CITY-data.com. You can go there and just type in the name of a city where you want to invest or where you want to at least research some prospective investments and take a look at they'll have a lot of economic data, demographics, a lot of information. You want to look at rent and vacancy trends. There are a number of different things you want to look for. So the things that I mentioned, population growth, job growth, unemployment, rent and vacancy trends. These are all things that you really want to have in place when you first begin researching a property. Another good website is bestplaces.net. I'll spell that one out as well for your listeners. B as in boy, ESTPLACES, bestplaces.net. And that's another website that contains, Best Places has some data that City Data does not have, and vice versa. So you really want to run any market you're researching through both those websites, and you'll have a lot of wonderful data at your fingertips for researching your prospective markets.
Awesome.
So those are definitely some things that you want to check. Once I'm researching a market and looking at a number of the market fundamentals, the things you initially want that I like to see, and again, I'm in more of the commercial class these days. I may have started with the duplex, triplexes, and fourplexes, but these days I'm looking at much larger projects.
Right.
So I always start with, these are our basics, experienced investors. These are all the routine things you asked for. The rent roll, the T12. T12, again, for listeners who don't know, that's a trailing 12-month financial statement. So, for example, we're in May. If I were to ask for a 2019 financial statement, that would give me a complete year, January to December, but that's a little bit dated at this point.
Right.
Trailing 12 months would go from, for example, May of 2019 through April of 2020, through last month.
Right.
So that would give us the most recent look, but still give us a full 12 months, which we'll need to see that full year for underwriting purposes. So you want that current rent roll. The rent roll will show you all the tenants, the rents, if they're on month to month or if they're leases. And if they're on lease, if it's a lease, when does the lease expire? And then you also want to research the cap rate for the area. If you're looking at duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, for those size properties, you want to look at sales comps. For the larger properties, it's going to be more based on cap rate, and you want to find out what is the overall cap rate for that market, and that's for that specific class and vintage of property in that market. So where do you get that information? Where do you find the overall cap rate? Where do you find sales comps? You also need rent comps. These are comparable properties. You want to look at what the rents are for similar units at similar properties, for one-bedroom floor plans, two-bedroom floor plans. Another great resource where you can find all of this is CoStar. CoStar reports. That's COSTAR. Now, you have to pay for that. It's not like Best Places and City Data, where it's a website that's available at your fingertips. You do have to pay a subscription. I think it's a monthly fee. I'm not a current subscriber, so I can't speak to what the rates are. But if you work with a real estate broker in the market where you're researching, many real estate brokers for that type of property will have access to this, and they can pull a CoStar report for the property you're researching, or even for that market, within seconds. So it's very easy for them to do that. And that CoStar report will have sales comps, rent comps, and the overall cap rate for that market, which you'll need to evaluate the larger properties.
Yep. Okay, awesome. I mean, that was a lot. There's a
lot of info, and I didn't even really get into the details on. I didn't even really answer your question on what we haven't even gotten to the property yet.
No, I know.
Once I'm looking at the property, that's going to depend on your goals. Do you want a property to have stabilized occupancy, 90 for 90, which would be minimum occupancy of 90% for the past 90 days? Why do we want the past 90 days? Well, that's seasoning. You want to see a seasoned occupancy, at least 90% for the past 90 days. And that's not just for you to understand you have a stable property, but lenders often require that. Well, some people don't necessarily need that. Some people don't mind buying a property that's 50% vacant, just to use an example, and you can get that at a tremendous discount. You won't be able to get permanent financing on it, but you can get a hard money loan, or maybe you have some other or a bridge loan, or you have some other options for acquiring the property. Uh, if you're new at this, you don't want to touch anything like that. I know you can make a lot of money potentially, but the risk is very, very high if
Yeah.
you're new and you don't have the experience and the resources yet. So I think starting with a property that's a little more stable. I can't speak to specific cap rates. Whatever
Right.
cap rate I mention, every investor is going to be different. I mean, I probably wouldn't look at anything below at least a 6 cap at the
Hmm.
moment. But again, that's a floor.
Right.
I mean, I like to find properties that are, maybe at least a 7 cap and higher. But it's hard. It's very competitive out there and hard to
Yep.
find those opportunities. So it depends on where we are in the cycle, what specifically I'm looking for, and a high cap rate in one market may not be a high cap rate in another market.
Right.
But I also have criteria for, and what my criteria won't be someone else's, but you need to ask yourself these questions: how old of a property do you want to buy? If you're buying a property that's much older, you're going to have things that may not be up to code, things that may
Yep.
require a lot of maintenance and repairs. What's your price range? What type of neighborhood do you want to get into? If you're getting into a more expensive neighborhood, your returns, you're going to be paying a lot more per door for the property, and your returns are going to possibly go down if you're looking for cash flow. And if you're looking for a cheaper property in a more marginal neighborhood, you might be dealing with crime issues and collection
Right.
issues for your rents. That might be difficult. What size property? What type of financing are you looking for? So there's a lot of different questions. That might have to be its own podcast, but those are at least a few questions that people will need to ask as they're evaluating different opportunities. Those criteria will change from person to person.
No, definitely. And yeah, it's totally up to your personal goals of what you want. I mean, there's cash flow, there's appreciation, there's different ways of, your ultimate goal of the property. And just to break it down, you gave some really good info, so I appreciate that for everyone. Citydata.com, bestplaces.net, and then the CoStar reports. And just to break down everything he was saying, you look at the market first, analyze everything about the market, and then you want to look at more of the financial part of the rents and everything, and then we look at the property itself, and then talking about getting financing, and then whether the property needs updating, where the property is, the schools, the neighborhood, everything like that. And that's all up to your personal goals and what you're looking for exactly. And then it's gonna be a lot of work to put all this together, but at the end of the day, it's worth it if you can get a good property. And the more you do it, the better you become at this, right, Dan?
Absolutely. And again, going back to what I said at the beginning, is everyone needs to ask yourself, if you're, especially if you're a beginning investor, do you want to be a passive investor or an active investor? Meaning, do you want to just be a passive investor where someone else is running the show, and you don't have to worry about all the day-to-day responsibilities, or do you want to be an active investor and understand the pros and cons? A passive investor is usually insulated from liability. You don't have to do anything. You don't have the responsibilities, but you're also not going to receive the same level of compensation, and you won't get the tax benefits that an active investor will. You will still get some tax benefits, but
Yeah.
those benefits will be far greater for the active investor. Compensation will be far greater for the active investor, who gets additional equity in most cases for putting a project together, as well as sometimes there might be fee structures such as an acquisition fee or an asset management fee. A lot of ways that the general partners are compensated. Or general partners, or LLC manager would be the more correct
Right.
legal term. But in exchange for all that extra compensation and tax benefits, you have the responsibility. You have to do all the work. You have to do
Yep.
all the running around. So people need to ask themselves: is it worth it to be an active investor, or would you rather be a passive investor and let somebody else handle the research and all the details and the headaches?
Yep, exactly. So that's also up to, your guys' personal goals. If you guys just want to be a passive investor and still do your own thing and passively invest in real estate, I definitely recommend it. It's going to be beneficial at the end of the day. Just know that you're not going to get as much, back from that. If you're an active investor, you're going to get, like you said, you're going to get a lot more reward, but you got to put in the work. So those are all great. So I really appreciate you breaking that down. Um, two things I'm really impressed with you. Like you said in the very beginning of the podcast, you sold in 2007 and you sold 2018. And as you can see, we're kind of in a recession, beginning of a recession right now. Unemployment is crazy. Obviously, it's a completely different situation than 2008, 2009. But how did you time those markets? I know, you know, you probably didn't know exactly at that time, but I got to get some insight on how did you time these?
Well, 2007 was, I'll go that backwards. 2018 was easier, where the properties that I was holding had just run their course. We made our money out of them. We had held everything for about, my partners and I, that is, had held everything for about 5 years, and it was just time to move on. Things had gone
Hmm.
very well for us. So that was just a matter of just letting the hold period run its cycle. 2007 was different. I had properties that I purchased in '03, '04 that were anticipated. We were expecting a 3 to 5 year hold period. At least that was our pro forma. Our projections were based on up to a 5 year hold. But in some cases, we only held the properties for 2 years. We sold everything. My partners and I at the time sold everything in 2007.
Wow.
And that was really a matter of just looking where the market was, looking where interest rates were at the time, looking how values had gone up, and it just seemed like we were poised for a correction. It seemed like it was overdue. I had people that, very, very few, but there were some voices that were getting panicked by the mid 2000s, but they seemed to be in the minority. I got nervous in 2006.
Hmm.
I just felt at that point that we were really at a peak. We were maybe passing a peak. It just felt like it was definitely time to sell. I cannot claim to have a crystal ball, as tempting as it is to do that and say that I knew it was happening, because I didn't,
Right.
nor was it dumb luck. It's never, nothing in life is ever one of those extremes. It's always something in the middle.
Right.
These were calculated decisions, but they were not, but they were calculated decisions. It was not just dumb luck that we just got lucky and sold at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not always the case. So we decided it was time to sell. We knew we were going to do very, very well with the sort of offers we were getting as we tested the market. But here's another thing about partnerships, and whether you want to go in with a partnership or go it alone, is I had partners at the time, and the bad news, if you want to look at it that way, is that some of the properties we owned, and these were properties on the West Coast. I didn't mention where I've invested, by the way, not to
Go ahead.
derail to
Yeah.
what my point right now. I've owned property in California, Oregon, Colorado, Georgia, and South Carolina.
Wow.
And I've been under contract on some projects in Texas recently. But no,
Nice.
I've actually owned property in the 5 states I mentioned: California, Oregon, Colorado, Georgia, and South Carolina. So these were largely in Oregon back in the 2000s. And my partners, the bad news that I was about to mention is that some of the properties in Oregon were far exceeding our expectations in terms of cash flow.
Hmm.
Where we were projecting, and I guess I can mention this in retrospect, that past performance is never a guarantee of
Yep.
future
Yep.
future performance. So with that disclaimer, but these particular properties, we were projecting a cash on cash return, meaning just the cash return from net cash flow from the properties.
Hmm.
We were projecting 8% per year,
Wow.
but some of the properties were offered yields that were in the mid-teens. So
Wow.
we're almost double what our original projections were, just in terms of the cash flow. That's before
Yeah.
you take into account appreciation or tax benefits or anything
Hmm.
else. And it's hard to sell that.
Yeah.
It's hard to let go of that when it's doing that well.
Yeah.
And so with the partnership, you had the guy that was really, really pushing aggressively to sell. That was
Hmm.
me.
Yep.
You had the guy who absolutely did not want to sell,
Right.
because he just was looking at the cash flow. And then there were two guys, and you always have in a partnership, the extreme personalities and then the more moderate personalities, and a couple
Yep.
other guys that were in the middle, like, well, I kind of agree with Dan. And the other guy was, well, I kind of agree with the other guy. And since there were four main general partners, we were essentially deadlocked.
Right.
What's the lesson to be learned there? And people kind of chuckle when I always say this: avoid even numbers
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
your partnership. If you get together
Interesting.
with some of your buddies, some of your business partners, you guys want to buy a property, whoever the decision makers are, keep it at 1, 3, or 5 at the most.
Interesting.
Even
Yeah.
5 is that's getting a little crowded, but hey, at least it's an odd number. You don't want to go above 5.
Right.
Having 2 people or 4 people doesn't work. Now, I know a lot of your listeners are hearing me right now and saying, well, no, it's easy to fix that. If you have 2 people, give one guy 51% and the other person 49%, solves the problem. Well, then it's not a partnership. The guy with 51% is essentially a dictator.
Yep.
And that's not a bad thing. It does fix the problem, but you essentially have one person in charge at that point.
Right.
And you guys need to be aware, it's not a partnership. It's one guy in charge.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So yeah, if you want to give one person, the problem it creates is the dynamic where the 49%er realizes that he or she will be outvoted every time.
No matter what. Yeah.
Yeah. Same with 4 people. Well, we'll give one guy, instead of 25% each, one guy gets 26% or 27% to break the tie. Again, the dynamic is just going to be, it won't be a very positive dynamic. It's going to create tension. You're still going to have 2 against 2. It's going to be a very uncomfortable partnership. Keep it at 3. One of my sayings is that people confuse the concept of balance with symmetry. Well, look at 4, 2 and 2. That you see a good symmetry there. It feels like balance. No, in business, balance comes from odd numbers. The triangle, not the square. You got 2 people, no balance. You need to add the third. I'm going to jokingly say I think marriages should work that way too, but and I'm only half joking with that. But there's got to be someone to step in and break the tie when the partners fight. I don't know if I can sell that concept with respect to marriage, but with respect to real estate partnerships, definitely do it, guys. I don't care if you grab someone who's, just going to have a token 5% of the partnership. It doesn't have to be equal splits. Someone's got to step in and be that tiebreaker.
Yeah.
It was lucky that we ultimately got everyone on board and were able to sell the portfolio in 2007, though.
Yeah, seriously. Good thing you got your point across, right?
Yep.
Wow. So that's really impressive. And I think that's something for people to look at as well, is don't just look at that, cash on cash. You have to look at the whole market in general and see where it's going. And, you really have to pay close attention to what's actually going on in, the lending space and the property space as well, because we saw a lot of bad loans going on, and a lot of people who shouldn't have got loans, and people who should have got loans didn't get loans. So it was a complete mess, as everyone probably knows. And we finally just, we had a huge bull market after that. And now we're running into this situation. So just to get a little insight on what are you projecting the real estate market to do in the next, 2-3 years from 2020?
Well, it's a little murky right now, and I'd hate to give a forecast without enough visibility. I don't want to give you a non-answer here. So
No, I know.
I'm going to say that we could have another bad situation. If enough people take forbearance, that's not just a matter of, we're giving people a break for a few months so they can get caught up.
Yeah.
That will have a domino effect. If enough people do it, if a significant percentage of people take forbearance, that could have a domino effect that could really cause a major correction in the market. So it's too soon for us to really be able to assess that. Yeah. So without giving you, whatever answer I give today could be very different in a month or two.
Exactly.
So I would say people can either choose to sit on the sidelines and wait it out, which I'm electing not to do. If you are going to move forward, you just need to have some hedges in place against, possible downturn. So a few things that I'm doing. I'm working on some multifamily projects right now in Texas, and a few things that I'm doing is, first, you have to be very careful in looking at what happened with rent collections in both April and May. And if collections have been dampened significantly, then you need to rethink that. We're also allowing, my current partners and I, in projects that we're working on now, we're making a very large, what we call a vacancy allowance, vacancy and collection losses of at least 25%. So even though the properties we're looking at are nowhere near that, we have our rent collections are in the low to mid 90%, the 93, 95% for April and May. we're allowing about 25% for the next year for vacancy and collection allowances. So we've budgeted for that in our projected
Interesting.
numbers.
Yeah.
Reserves. We're
Right.
budgeting over 6-month reserves to cover operating expenses in the event that there could be a downturn and we could suffer some rent or collection losses. So we're budgeting for that as well. Some lenders will force you to do that. They'll make you, like Fannie Mae, for example, if you're above a certain loan to value, they will insist that you escrow 12 months of replacement reserves, as well as
Hmm.
taxes, insurance. There's a number of different things that they're going to insist be escrowed for 12 months. And
Yeah.
that's a lot of money to set
Yeah.
aside. I'm getting a Fannie Mae loan right now, but we're only they're only making us do 6 months because we're at about 65% loan to value. That's another thing. Keep your loan to value, your leverage from the lenders on the lower side.
Right.
I think 65% is very safe right now.
Yeah.
You don't want to be doing the old, 75, 80% right now would be, I think is too aggressive with finance, if you could even get that.
Right.
And be aware of what your break even is. I mentioned keeping 6 months reserves in the bank, to cover our break even. And then here's something else that some people may not be considering. For those of you multifamily investors who work with third-party management companies, when I take over a property, I always like to bring in a new management company. I never usually like what a current management company is doing. I always feel we can do better in a number of different ways. So I always bring in a management company, again, a third-party contractor with whom I've got a good track record, or who has a good track record with me, I should say. And then they're going to also restaff the property with their own on-site personnel. With the situation we're in, a lot of people are very scared. A lot of people have everything from how they're able to cover their bills, whether they're getting getting stimulus checks, whether they're getting assistance from the city, what sort of relationship they have with the current management staff at the property. Some people are more, it could even come down to personality quirks of some people more germophobic than others, and understanding how to deal with all the different tenants.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated situation right now, and disrupting things by yanking all the on-site staff and putting your own people in there, or the employees of your management company you're bringing on board, putting them in there, might be a disruption with relations with the current tenants that may not be a good idea right now.
I see.
So if tenants are in a good place where they're feeling protected, and they're feeling, again, assuming current management is doing a good job and the tenants aren't screaming for that management to be fired, but
Hmm.
if they're doing a good job, you may want to rethink bringing in your own management company, at least temporarily, at least for now, leaving current management in place after you close for maybe 60 to 90 days, so you can make it more of a, kind of ease your way into the transition, prepare for that transition, get to know the tenants, get to know what their situations are, make them feel at ease. Again, a lot of people are really, really scared right now. A
Yeah.
lot of your tenants are going to be very scared. It's not
Yep.
business as usual right now.
Nope.
So that's another thing that we're taking into consideration, is leaving current management and current staff in place if you can, if you're able to. If it was a third party company that you're able to leave in place, and not the seller's own employees, then you
Yeah.
can leave them in place for, like I said, maybe 60 to 90 days after closing, and then affect the transition once you familiarize yourself with the tenant base and with what everyone's fears and concerns are.
Yeah. I really appreciate you giving all this depth on each question we're going into. We could talk probably hours and hours and hours about real estate investing and all
Probably
the
could.
specifics and everything. But just so I can have the people know, let's get a little more into your mindset and how you became so successful, and how you really do this every single day. If you could just give the people an idea of what do you do every single day to get better, or to grow, or to learn? What are those things that you do every day, that where you take the step forward, instead of just standing there passively?
Well, you just hit the nail right on the head with one of the words you just said, is learn.
Hmm.
How you grow every single day is you have to learn. I always kind of joke that I want to be smarter than I was yesterday,
Yep.
and
Yep.
I want to learn something new. I do this in a number of ways. I try to read and study every day. Not, there cannot be a better time than now.
Right.
I try to, uh, I'm on Zoom calls every single day with other real estate people. There are a lot of resources out there,
Yeah.
and if any of your listeners are curious, they should check in with you. I know you have a lot of different resources, and you
Yep.
also know some of the same people I know, and can
Yep.
get on a number of inspiring and very informative Zoom calls. I usually do those every morning.
Yep.
And always try to learn. There are a number of online courses and videos and things that people can be watching or listening to. A podcast like this one. You want to be
Right.
learning something every single day,
Yep.
and I make that commitment to always be learning something new. And that's the most important thing. Is right now we've got to be expanding our knowledge. And expanding your skills to the extent that you can, even though some of the things you're learning might be academic, getting them from a
Yeah.
book or from a video, but you still need to get those that foundation, and then that knowledge, once you apply it out in the real world, it then becomes wisdom.
Yep. 100% agree. I totally believe in learning every single day. The whole, point of this podcast is to help people grow every single time they listen to it. And so it's super important. Every single day I wake up, I say, I want to learn at least one thing new today. Obviously I want to
Mhm.
learn a lot more things, but if, the bare minimum is one new thing a day, that's going to help me go forward. So 100% agree on that. And I know you've done a lot and you've been through a lot. And I just wondering, this is just a question that you can answer it however you like. But how do you define success?
How do I define success? I love that question. Well, I would say I define success by thinking in terms of your results, that your results should exceed your vision.
Hmm.
So here's an example. Think of an artist. Think of an artist who is collaborative. We don't really get into where I live or what other work I do, but I live right near the movie studios in Hollywood, in the Los Angeles area. So very close to the film industry. So think of, for
Yeah.
example, a filmmaker collaborating with a number of other artists on a film project. If the film turns out and the film director sits down and watches the completed film, if it looks exactly how he or she pictured it, exactly how he or she originally envisioned it, and translated that vision precisely to film, I don't know if I consider that success. It's success only to a point, but your results should exceed your vision. Through creating that art, as well as collaborating with other people, you should be able to create something that's beyond what you had originally thought possible.
Hmm.
Almost like if your past self met your future self, how you would dazzle your past self with what you've become, and you think that your future self would dazzle your present self. So when I talk about your results, I used a movie as an example,
Yeah.
but you could apply that to a business that you're building or an investment, or you could even apply that to something in your life like a romantic relationship, or even yourself as a person.
Hmm.
Your results as a person, that it might even apply to a specific goal like a fitness goal.
Hmm.
And you look at your future self should exceed your present vision. So you should be able to become someone that is beyond what you thought possible for yourself.
Wow. Yeah, that's I haven't heard that one yet, but that is really, really interesting. And I think a lot of people should take that on. Now I'm just thinking about all the things that I've done that I've exceeded that vision originally, and that's such an amazing way to think of success. Really, really interesting. I appreciate that insight on that. And so I'm just gonna end the podcast here with a couple roundup questions, just rapid fire. So
Sure.
answer them. Just gonna be super simple, super quick. Just get through them, and then the last question you can take as much time on. But I'm just gonna go ahead and go to it. So, top three people in your life that help shape you.
Oh, wow.
I didn't give you these questions. I know. I try to make you think
Yeah,
off the top of your head.
I'm just going to go top three. Gosh, I would say my mom, my dad seem like obvious choices,
Yeah,
but I've had a number of mentors over the years. So I know for me to say my parents and some of the mentors that I've had
got it.
would be a quick answer.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Okay. And if you could have anything in the world right now, what would it be?
total freedom.
Total freedom. Interesting.
Yeah,
That's
that's
awesome.
to me that's what real estate's all about. Everyone's driven by something different, but for me, it's
Right.
all about freedom.
No, everyone has their big why and why they do things. Exactly. Total freedom. Great. What other profession would you like to attempt?
Oh, filmmaking.
Filmmaking.
Wasn't an
Nice.
accident that I used that as an example. Well, that's one of my side. We're not going to talk about that on a real
No, no, no,
estate
it's okay.
podcast, but I'm involved in the entertainment business, and I've actually directed a number of short films to
Oh,
Hollywood.
wow. Oh, that's awesome. Very cool. That's great. Okay. And what are you not very good at?
Oh gosh, no, that's actually an easy one. Whenever I start, I know I'm supposed to give you short answers, but that's not
No
possible
worries.
for me. Just a very verbose guy. Whenever I get involved in a real estate partnership, when you're younger, like in your 20s, I know you are, you need everyone to think you know everything because you
Hmm.
impress people like that.
Hmm.
And I got older, I learned, no, I need to tell people what I'm not good at. And I'll tell people when it comes to real estate law, I speak the language of lawyers. I work with lawyers. I understand LLCs. I understand private placement offerings. I understand all of that. I don't speak accountant. I don't speak CPA. It just baffles me. So
Right.
I always delegate everything to my CPA, my tax professionals. I just don't get what I'm not that I get math, but I just don't understand
Yeah.
their categories and classifications for different things. It just my mind tunes out. I'm like you deal with it.
Yeah,
Let someone else.
I think that's
Yeah,
really important when anyone wants to become, successful in business is to know what you're not good at and let the people who are good at it, let them do it,
yep,
because that's the best way to run a business and
yeah.
you do what
I
you're
love
good
my
at.
lawyers, but I kind of give a sidelong glance at my CPAs, like, yeah, you guys do your thing, leave me out of it.
All right, Dan. Last question. Take as much time as you want on this one. What is one piece of advice you want to leave the audience with today?
One piece of advice I would leave the audience with today would be if you're going to get into real estate investing, fall in love with it.
Mm,
Whatever you do in life, even if you don't do real estate investing, you need to love what you do. And if you don't love what you do, fall in love with it.
yeah.
Fall in love. I don't know if I would extend that to your personal relationships. If you don't love what you're doing, fall in love with it. But at least your career, yeah, if you want to get involved in investing, you talk about you want to do business with people like and trust.
Yep.
You also want to invest in investment vehicles that like and trust.
Right.
That's why I got involved in real estate, because I knew it. My dad was a realtor. I liked it, and I trust it in the sense that I can look at a piece of property and feel a sense of security and ownership and control that I don't necessarily feel looking at buying a stock where it's managed by executives that I don't have any control over, where you put your money in the stock market.
Yeah.
I like the
Yeah.
real estate market. Yeah, know, like, and trust it. Fall in love with what you're doing.
I love it. Yeah, I hear that one all the time, just said in different ways. But you got to love what you're doing basically at the end of the day. If you don't love it, what's the point? Why are you doing it? I mean, you're not going to be happy at the end of the day. And I think that's really, really important. So that's it. That is the podcast. Thank you so much, Dan, for being on. I really appreciate all your advice, all your wisdom. And we got to talk soon and have you on again. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know we could talk forever, but thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, Brandon, thanks so much for